Hello, I'm Alison McManus, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about the module which I teach for the Foundation Centre, which is English Literature. Obviously, with a title like English Literature, there's a huge range of texts that we'll be talking about, and you'll study a range of different texts, different genres, from poetry to plays to short stories, and you'll even have the opportunity to write a little bit yourself and do a bit of creative writing. And what we'll focus on is learning how to read and appreciate these texts and using different techniques and skills in order to interpret and understand literature. In the first teaching block, we'll start off with Romeo and Juliet, which is kind of an obvious place to start with good old Shakespeare. It's a text that most students are familiar with. It's a great story, and there's a lot to get into it. And the themes from Romeo and Juliet are things that actually will carry us through right through the semester. We'll use a lot of the techniques that we use to understand Romeo and Juliet. We'll use those throughout the rest of the term. Then we'll move on to fairy tales, which is a little bit of a surprise for students. Sometimes they think those are just for children, but we'll talk about the meanings of these stories and how these tales have been sometimes reinterpreted by authors like Angela Carter or Carol Ann Duffy, our poet laureate, they've both reinterpreted fairy tales in order to give them a new meaning. And then you'll have the chance to do that yourselves by retelling a story and then reflecting on that and situating that by using some critical work. Then we'll finish off the semester with poetry from the First World War, which is quite a sad place to end the term, but it's very, very memorable and incredibly important legacy that we have from the First World War. And in January, after Christmas, you'll have a test on the poems and on Romeo and Juliet. And then we'll move on to focusing on the novel. You'll have a choice of 25 texts that you can select one from. I'll give that list to you right at the beginning of the semester. And in fact, I've included it here on the website for you. So if you like, you can start looking at them and deciding which one you're going to focus on now. You've got a range of texts to pick from classics like Dickens or Emily Bronte, and then you've got more contemporary novels as well, things like White Teeth by Zadie Smith, or even Bridget Jones's Diary. You can then choose one of those, and you'll be doing your own literary analysis as we move through the semester. So I really want students to choose a text that they like and they feel happy with and they're excited about reading. And I've tried to pick as many different texts as possible so that everyone has something that will appeal to them. In class, we'll be looking at a couple of novels together, starting with Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, and hopefully we'll have the opportunity to visit the Bronte parsonage in Haworth, and then we'll compare that with Jean Rhys's novel, a 1966 novel, Wide Sargasso Sea, which is, I think, really an exciting way to look at those texts, is to look at the meanings between the two. At the end of the semester, after the Easter holiday, you will have the chance to read some love poems, again, a really important legacy, a literary legacy. And in this time you'll have the opportunity to put all the skills you've gained over the year into practice by leading your own seminar in which you use all the techniques that we've learned about reading literature to analyze a poem of your choice and discuss it. The poems and Jane Eyre and Wide Sargasso Sea will be examined at the end of the year in the exam, and your assignment in the second teaching block will focus on that text, the novel that you've chosen, and you'll have a couple of different parts to submit. It's more of a portfolio assignment. So the skills that you'll gain in the module are, of course, reading and interpreting literature, and hopefully those skills will extend to the way in which we understand a variety of other texts, for example, films or advertisements. And then, of course, you'll get some library and essay writing skills. You'll be doing a lot of independent study. And then you'll also be working together in groups in class, and then you'll be developing your seminar and presentation skills as well. And what I really want students to gain from the class is the ability to think critically about what we read and the way we respond to it. So instead of looking at a novel or a book or even a play or a film and saying, oh, I liked that or I didn't like it, you really start to think about those reasons, and you can have a more concrete justification for your feelings or your emotional reaction. one of the ways that you can prepare for the module is to think about whether it's a film or a book. Instead of saying you liked it, you didn't like it, think about what you're reacting to and why you're reacting it in that way. Is it the characters? Were they unsympathetic? Did the plot move too slowly? Was the style a bit difficult and dense? Or if it's something that you really enjoyed, maybe you felt that it was, there were great characters, a wonderful setting, and the plot just zipped along. So the ways that you can prepare then are to start reading widely, no matter what it is that interests you, and ask yourself those kinds of questions. As I said before, there's a list here on the website that you can start reading one or more of the novels on the list, and you can start looking at the texts that we'll study, like Romeo and Juliet, the fairy tales, World War I poetry. You don't need to necessarily start going into a huge amount of detail, but for example with Romeo and Juliet, if you want to start becoming more familiar with the plot and the characters and the storyline, that will help you. Similarly with the fairy tales and the World War I poetry, you might just want to do a bit of research on the internet and start getting your head around what the ideas are that we'll be looking at, and start thinking about what you plan to work with in your assignments. So I'm very much looking forward to meeting you all when you join the class.